Hello everyone, this is the second video in a series about basic Windows domain management, and in the previous video I showed you how to install VMware and then install Windows Server, and since then all I have done, I log in, is use the same method to install Windows Server, but instead of Windows Server I've installed two Windows client computers. So in my list of devices or guests, I have my domain controller, and then I have Bob's PC and Jane's PC. So the network looks like this. We've got the Windows Server, which I've installed, the new Bob's computer and the new Jane's computer. They're all connected via a virtual switch through the ESXi host computer into a physical router, which runs, at the moment, I should say, runs DHCP, DNS, and does NAT routing out to the internet. What I'm hoping to do in this video is set a static IP address on the Windows Server and promote it to being a domain controller. Part of that will mean that the Windows Server will start running a DNS server, and eventually we probably will also want to move DHCP off of the router over to the Windows Server as well. At the moment, all three of these devices are just straight DHCP. So if we're going to say Bob's computer, and do an ipconfig all, they are DHCP, and the DHCP server is 192.168.0.1, which is my physical router in the lab network, not the server. So if I go over to the server, and then log in, and do the same thing. You'll see the IP address of the server is 192.168.0.102, which has been retrieved from DHCP on the router as well. So at the moment, these are all just independent computers. If I fire up I minimize the server, go back to Bob's PC. If I fire up a web browser, let's give Edge a go. It will have internet access. Basically, it's just as if you'd walked into an office with just a bunch of computers, so you've got two computers, and then you've just installed a server and you want to start using the server. So what we need to do is go to the domain controller. Hopefully the resolution on this isn't too small and it won't let me use the wizard, but we'll give it a go. So in the basic server manager, you want to add roles and features. And yeah, this is where I was worried the resolution is too small, that it hides the next button. So I'm just going to move the start menu over to the right hand side, or the taskbar over to the right hand side, so we can get to the next button down the bottom here. So I've gone into add roles and features. Next, we want role-based installation. This bit here is if you wanted to control or make changes to another server that wasn't the machine that you were connected to. Again, for most people, you'd never really select any other server from your server pool. You would make sure you were selected on the server that you wanted to. Before we do this, actually, it might be a good idea to name the server. So I've already named the Windows client computers. If I go over to Bob's computer, and I do either go into control panel, So the easy way to get to control panel is to use just start and then run and type in the word control. And that gives you the classic control panel, which is much nicer than the Windows 10 horrible thing that they try to make everyone use. If I go into system, it will say computer name. So at the moment, it's called John's-Office-PC. I've done the same with Jane's computer. That's called Jane's computer. The other way of getting the host name of a computer is in command prompt, do echo %computer name and then another %, and there you go, John's Office PC. So that's fine. On the network, it's very easy to see the two Office computers. However, the Windows Server by default has named itself a random name, so win dash and then a load of gibberish. So to change the name of the server, you can either go start, type in run, and then select the run option, or in this case I right-clicked on the start menu, went down in the down arrow, and then went to the run option. Then I'm going to type in control and press OK, because that's the easiest way to get to the classic control panel. Where it says category, I want to change that to small icon so that I can actually see everything. And then I'm going to go into System. In System, click on Advanced System Settings, and then Computer Name, so the Computer Name tab. And I'm going to change the computer name to be called Server 2019. And at the moment, we're going to leave it on workgroup because we can't make it a member of a domain because there's no other domain controllers in our network at the moment. So leave that as workgroup. We'll reboot and then we will install the roles that will allow this server to become a domain controller. So now we're back into the server. I'm going to add roles and features. Still busy with this little animation at the top. Looks like it's finished now, so add roles and features. Next on the wizard, again, next, select this computer is now called Server 2019, so it's very easy to understand which computer we're about to modify. So next, we want Active Directory Domain Services. It tells you what other requisites it needs, so things and tools that come along with installing that role, it will automatically add for you, so add features. I don't think, while we're here, we'll also add the DHCP. No static IP address is found, we'll change that later, so for the moment we will just click on continue. And DNS server. And again, I'm just going to click on continue because we will set a static IP address before promoting this computer to being a domain controller. And that's all I think I want to add for the moment. So next. What I find useful almost always on any computer is in the features section, scrolling down and ticking the Telnet client. You never know when you may need it. It doesn't add any amount of disk space usage, and it's not a security problem. So Telnet client is going to be useful, probably be useful for some of my demonstrations in the future. So I'm just going to make sure that that's enabled. And I'm just going to click past all this advice. If it's the first time you're doing this, you should read it. It'll probably tell you some interesting things that you need to know, but for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to click past them. Restart the server if required. I don't think we need to well, actually, might do, but well, I won't tick that, and we will see whether it asks me to. This button here is the install button, which you can't see because it's slightly off the bottom of the screen. Yeah, there we go. Install. And there we go. Installation succeeded. That bar's got to the end. I can close that window. You can close it earlier, but there's very little indication on this screen about how the install has gone, so I tend to leave that window open until it's finished, so I know that it's finished. So we're now ready to configure this server or promote the server to a domain controller. So I won't do it just yet because we need to set a static IP address first, but if I go to Active Directory DS, which stands for Domain Services, it's asking me to configure it, so configuration required, and then it will talk me through that. But as I say, you will want to have configured a static IP address for your server before you do that. So I'm going to right click on the network icon, click on Open Network and Internet Settings, click on Change Adapter Options. So here's the network adapter. I'm going to right click on it and go to Properties, and in the TCP IP version 4, click on that, or either double click on it or click on it and then go to Properties. And I want to give it a static IP address, so use the following IP address. And I'm going to do 192.168.0.2, so one IP address up from my router. It's a good idea to make sure that before you set a static IP address that it isn't in use. So the easy way to do that, if you're sure that everything in the network is currently on and should be responding, is to just try pinging it. So if you go Start and then Run, and then go into Command Prompt, so CMD, and ping 192.168.0.2, it should say Request Timed Out, because, or in fact in this case, Destination Host Unreachable, which is even better because it means that there is nothing on the network that is responding to ARP requests. If I ping a machine, so Bob's PC, I'm just going to guess at the IP address. 100. Yeah, so that is a device which is responding. If I try, say, 101. So it's quite easy to tell which things or IP addresses you should or could use or couldn't use. There are situations where things on the network might not reply to a ping, but for very basic quick checking of whether an IP is in use on a small network where it's going to be very obvious if you do collide and knock something off the network, then just doing a ping is the quickest and easiest way. So Windows is quite good at filling in a subnet mask. For most small networks, it will fill in the correct information. If you think that you might have a different subnet mask, check on another computer, or if your server is currently DHCP, do the ipconfig/all and just make sure that what you fill into that static IP address settings box is the same as the subnet mask that DHCP on the existing router has been giving out. So in my case that's correct. And default gateway, again, easiest way is copy it from the ipconfig output. So default gateway 0.1. And for the moment, until I've made this machine a domain controller, I'm just going to fill in the same DNS server as well. So DNS servers 192.168.0.1. And then OK, close. And that's it. That's set a static IP address on the server. So on your internal network, that server will always be on 192.168.0.2. Now we should be able to promote this to a domain controller. So if you've rebooted and closed all these windows, what you need to bring up is the server manager. So normally just start, and then there'll be a tile called server manager. But if you start typing in the start box server, so if we're going to here and do server manager, there you go, it's one of the options that will come up as a result when you search. So I've gone into server manager, click on ADDS, which is Active Directory Domain Services. There's a very big, not very big, there's a yellow obvious banner which tells you that you need to configure Active Directory. So click on More. Then it says configuration is required for the Active Directory. And then the only thing you can really click on is promote server to a domain controller. So yes, we want to do that. So one of the options you might use in the future is if you're doing a domain migration, which I'll go through probably in another video much further down the line, will be these two top options. But in this case, we want to add a new forest. So we don't have any existing domains and we don't have an existing forest because it's a blank network. So it's going to be add a new forest. So my root domain name, I'm not sure what the current best practice advice from Microsoft is on this, but I tend to still stay away from using a real internet-based domain name. So quite often you see a Windows NT or a Windows Active Directory set up with the domain name bobswidgets.com. And then you have the problem where people within the Active Directory network can't visit Bob's Widget's own website because that traffic gets sent to the domain controller instead of getting sent out onto the internet. So what is normally done is you'd use bobswidgets.local or bobswidgets.admin or something similar to a domain which shouldn't or doesn't exist on the internet. The trouble you've got these days is the internet or IANA, whoever does the domain names, is letting people buy up names. So if you've called it bobswidgets.home, that actually could now be a real domain on the internet, which is quite annoying. But I do believe they've reserved .internal as a domain name that shouldn't be allowed to be registered in the future. That may change. It might be worth looking up, Googling for best practices for root domain names or Active Directory domain names. But in this case, in this example, I'm going to call it bobswidgets.internal. So our company name is, I guess we'll call it Bob's Widgets, and so the domain name for the Active Directory will be bobswidgets.internal. At this point, it should do a check to see if there are any other domain controllers with that name, which it's come back and it's now offering me to set up passwords and stuff, so that's fine. It won't let you, if you're plugged into the same network with a domain which is already called that, it will warn you and it won't let you go any further. So for a brand new setup, these settings will be fine. Don't need to worry about the functional level because we're not joining any old servers to it. This option is to set a restore mode password. So if your Active Directory breaks and you have to essentially go into what might otherwise be called safe mode, and because the Active Directory is broken, you can't use your normal Windows Active Directory or network password. You have to have a password which is independent to that. So I'm going to, because I'm lazy, and it might not be good practice, but for this demo, and so I don't forget it while I'm recording this video series, I'm going to use the same admin password which I'm using for everything, which is 0shell1 exclamation mark with a capital Z or Z. I've always had this error message about DNS delegations. I've never had it be a problem. So next, that might be if you had chosen the domain, for example, network.bobswidgets.com, it might go off to GoDaddy or Azure if your DNS is there and try and create a delegation. But again, for pretty much every setup I've seen, that's not been used, so skip that stage. Again, this option will suggest a name for you. I would leave it exactly as it is and just click on next. Again, unless for some reason you have a really resource-strapped server, I wouldn't move those, I'd leave them as default. But if you needed to change them to be, for example, the D drive, this is where you change that. Review the options to make sure that it's all correct. And there we go, it's ready to install. So we've seen that error message, we don't mind about that. And to do with allowing weaker encryption, you might want to read that. But again, for the purposes of this video and getting an Active Directory domain up and running, just going to click on install. And it looks like the server's about to be restarted. At this point it restarted and took a very long time to come up with the initial logon. I will be editing or speeding up this video to save you the time. Right, we're now ready to log on. So actions, send keys, Control-Alt-Delete. So I need to log on as the administrator, 0 shell 1 exclamation mark. So there we have it. That's basically a NT domain or an Active Directory domain set up, and your own server has logged in to that domain. So the next step will be to configure it so that clients can successfully log in or join the domain and then log into it. So the first thing I want to check is to see what changes, if any, have been made to the network setup, so the static IP address and the DNS servers. So I've right-clicked on the network, gone Open Network and Internet Settings, click on Change Adapter Options, and then we have the lovely Windows 10 mess where for some reason the Metro screen can't load the non-Metro apps. I've seen that problem once before and I cannot remember what was causing it. It's possibly something to do with user account control. The easiest way around this is just not to use the Metro screen, so I'm just going to go right click on the Start menu, click on Run, type in Control, and there's the proper control panel. Thank you, the original decent Windows control panel. Network and Sharing Center. Change adapter settings. Oh look, we can get to that screen, so I don't know why loading it from the Metro or the new style application isn't working. So the changes that it's made to IPv4, the only change it has made is it's changed the DNS server. If you're not already aware, that IP address, ping 172.0.0.1 on all computers or any, oops, if I could type it correctly, 127, probably even say it correctly as well. So 127.0.0.1 is the, on any computer, is that specific computer's local, what might be referred to as local loopback IP. It's the IP address for the machine itself. So if you go to Bob's PC and you ping that same IP address, it's not going to go over the network, it's going to stay within Bob's PC, and it's the way that the computer can talk back to itself. So what's gone on here for the preferred DNS server is it is asking itself, or will be asking itself, for the DNS responses, which is what I would expect. Oops, didn't need to click on that. So the next thing I would check as good practice is the DNS server is configured correctly. So the easiest way to get to that, click on Start and probably type in DNS, and there's the DNS desktop app. In fact, the other way I'll show you to get to this is in the standard control panel. So Start, Control Panel, or Start and Run and Control. Under Administrative Tools is DNS. And what I will be looking for in here is I'll be right-clicking on the server itself, going to Properties, And what's very important, and especially if you're on a network with a firewall that doesn't allow you to access a lot of stuff, is the forwarders. And it has automatically put in the original DNS server that I had in the network settings. But if this network list is blank or has the wrong information in it, you might find that the server can no longer get to websites or can't look up names. Also, saying here, unable to resolve, doesn't mean it's not working. It just means that there is no fully qualified domain name or reverse DNS for that IP address. So that saying unable to resolve is not an issue. Don't worry about that. Just make sure that the IP address that you have there is actually a DNS server and does respond to DNS queries. But what I was doing there is checking that it had filled in that information. If you don't fill in any forwarders, it will look things up using the root servers, which gets quite complicated, is slower than using a specific DNS server, so you generally always want something filled in that screen. So what we've done in this video is installed the Active Directory domain services role, promoted the server to an Active Directory server, and checked that the DNS server information is set correctly and the static IP address information is set correctly. The next video will be going into the Active Directory users and computers section and adding in users and then joining a computer to the domain. Before we do that, we'll also need to move DHCP off of the router and onto the Windows server. I'll also just quickly chuck a bit of text here that the Windows server is now running DNS as well. So we've got DNS also running on the router, DNS running on the Windows server. The next step, DHCP will be moved over to the Windows server. We'll add some users and passwords for Bob and Jane. We'll then join Bob and Jane to the domain and go from there. So that'll be in the next video. Look out for part 3. If this video has been helpful to you, it'll be really, really helpful to me if you wouldn't mind subscribing to my YouTube channel. Don't worry about having the new video alerts switched on or not, but having the extra subscriber count would be really, really useful. Thank you.